On Thanksgiving, my fiancé said, "Your son is too sensitive." My daughter was just being honest. Right after her daughter mocked his panic attack in front of the whole table. I said, "You're right. He's sensitive to disrespect." And we left. 3 hours later, my fiancé called 21 times asking why her cards weren't working. On Thanksgiving, my fiancé looked me dead in the face and said, "Your son is too sensitive. My daughter was just being honest." She said it less than 5 minutes after her daughter mocked my boy's panic attack in front of the entire table. I remember every detail because rage preserves moments in perfect clarity. The silverware had gone still. The candles on her mother's dining table flickered in the draft from the kitchen. Someone's cranberry sauce was slowly sliding off a spoon. My son, Eli, sat beside me with his shoulders locked, his eyes fixed on his plate, trying with everything he had not to cry harder than he already was. Across from us, her daughter Sophie leaned back in her chair and said, "I was literally just showing everyone what he does. I didn't even exaggerate." Then she pressed a hand to her chest, widened her eyes, and took those shallow, broken little breaths again. A perfect imitation of the way my 12-year-old son sounded 2 months earlier when he had a panic attack in a school parking lot after some kid locked him in a bathroom as a joke. The whole table had seen it. The mockery, the silence, the humiliation. My fiancée, Lena, didn't tell her daughter to apologize. She didn't even look shocked. She sighed, took a sip of wine, and said, "Your son is too sensitive. My daughter was just being honest." I looked at Eli first. That is the part I'm proudest of. Not the line I said next. Not the way we left. Not what happened later. I'm proud that I looked at my son first. He was trying to disappear into himself, staring at his plate like if he stayed quiet enough, small enough, maybe the room would move on. I knew that look. I had seen it after his mother left when he was 6. I had seen it again when the bullying started in middle school. It was the face of a child deciding his pain was inconvenient to everyone else. I put my hand over his shaking fist. Then I looked at Lena and said, calm as glass, "You're right. He's sensitive to disrespect." I stood up. Eli stood up with me. At first, nobody moved. The room seemed to freeze, like everyone was still waiting for this to become one of those family moments people laugh off after dessert. Lena gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "Vincent, don't be dramatic." I picked up Eli's coat from the back of the chair. "We're leaving." Her mother blinked. "Now? Dinner's just started." "Yes." Lena set down her wine glass harder this time. "So, you're seriously storming out because 2 kids had an interaction?" Eli flinched at the word interaction, like what had happened to him was some harmless little exchange, instead of public humiliation. I helped him into his coat, zipped it up, then put on mine. Sophie rolled her eyes. Oh my God. That was when Lena finally stood. "If you walk out over this, you are making everything worse." I turned to face her. "No. What made everything worse was your daughter mocking my son's panic attack while you sat there and defended it." She folded her arms. "Sophie tells the truth. That's not cruelty. Maybe Eli needs to toughen up instead of expecting the world to cushion him." I felt Eli go rigid beside me, and something cold, something final settled in my chest. For 2 years, I had been explaining away comments like that, reframing them, smoothing them over, telling myself Lena was blunt, not unkind, protective of her daughter, not dismissive of my son. I had turned my instincts into background noise because I loved her, because we were supposed to be building a family, because people always say blended families are hard, and I thought difficulty meant effort. But there is effort, and then there is corrosion. This was corrosion. I took Eli's backpack from the hallway bench and opened the front door. Behind me, Lena said, "If you leave now, Vincent, don't expect me to keep begging you to come back." I almost laughed. Begging had never really been Lena's style. Expecting? Absolutely. Demanding? Professionally. But begging? Never. I looked over my shoulder once. That won't be a problem. Then Eli and I walked out into the freezing November dark. The air hit us like cold water. Leaves scraped across the driveway. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked and a porch light clicked on. Eli got into the passenger seat without a word. I sat behind the wheel for a second, both hands gripping it, breathing hard, staring through the windshield while the house glowed warm and golden behind us, like a lie. When I started the engine, Eli finally spoke. Very quietly, he asked, "Are you mad at me?" I turned so fast I nearly pulled a muscle. "What?" He swallowed. He still couldn't look at me. Because I made it weird. That sentence will probably stay with me for the rest of my life. Not because he said it, because some part of him believed it. I reached across the console and took his hand. "Listen to me. You did nothing wrong. None of that was your fault. None of it. Do you hear me?" His eyes filled immediately, and he nodded once, but he still looked unconvinced. So I said it again. Then I drove us home. My name is Vincent. I'm 38, a graphic designer, and until Thanksgiving, I was stupid enough to think love plus patience could fix a dynamic built on contempt. I work in brand identity and packaging design. I started freelancing in my 20s, built a small studio, hired a few contractors, and now earn enough that people assume I have a polished, carefully balanced life. My work is exactly that. Color, balance, shape, message. At home, for the last 2 years, I had been living inside a composition that never balanced, no matter how much I adjusted it. Lena and I met at a charity gallery event. She was sharp, elegant, magnetic, in a way that made everyone else in the room seem underdressed. She worked in medical sales, made excellent money when her bonuses came in, and had the kind of confidence that made you feel selected when she focused on you. She said she loved that I was creative and stable. I loved that she was driven and fearless. In the beginning, things felt easy. She was kind to Eli at first. She remembered what cereal he liked, asked about his drawings, told people he was such an old soul. Sophie was prickly, but 15-year-old girls often are, and I figured time would soften her. Lena always told me, "It's an adjustment. She's protective of me." So I made room. Then I made more room. Then I looked up and realized I had rebuilt my life around someone else's comfort. It happened slowly. That was the danger. At first, it was little things. Sophie making fun of Eli for crying at movies, Lena smiling and saying, "She's not wrong." Sophie hiding his hoodie as a joke and him finding it in the outside trash. Sophie calling one of his drawings childish in front of guests. Lena later telling me, "I just don't believe in overreacting to every unpleasant moment." But all those little things added up. Eli was always expected to absorb. Sophie was always excused. And Lena always told the story in a way that protected her daughter at the expense of my son. When Eli got diagnosed with anxiety, Lena called it a label kids hide behind. When his therapist suggested calmer transitions and fewer overwhelming family gatherings, Lena said the world wasn't going to rearrange itself for fragility. When he asked to skip one loud family dinner because crowds made him feel trapped, she told him, smiling, "Avoidance feeds fear." She said it like wisdom. What she meant was inconvenience. The financial side tangled the same way. Lena earned well, yes, but she also spent like stability was guaranteed. Instead of built, at first we split things sensibly. Then she had a slow quarter. Then a delayed bonus. Then tuition trouble with Sophie. Then her lease ended during a housing spike. Then moving in just made sense. On paper, it did. In practice, my house became our house, while my accounts became the emergency backup for every problem she called temporary. I paid the mortgage because it was my house. Fine. Then I covered utilities because she was getting back on track. Then I paid part of Sophie's orthodontics because her father stalled again. Then I bought the SUV Lena needed for work and winter and family life, even though she drove it almost all the time. When her credit cards started choking under interest, I added her as an authorized user on one of my cards. With a spending cap, she immediately treated like a suggestion. Every time I tried to talk about repayment, she pivoted into emotion. You know what it's like to have a child depending on you. Are we a team or not? Why do you always make practical conversations sound punitive? I knew something was wrong, but I kept stepping back from conflict because Eli hates tension in the house. He hears one slammed cabinet and goes silent for an hour. So I told myself I was keeping the peace. I wasn't. I was financing my own disrespect. 3 months before Thanksgiving, I came home early from the studio and found Sophie in the kitchen doing an impression of Eli breathing into a paper bag. Lena sat at the island on a work call, smiling into her headset like nothing was happening. I said, "Stop." Sophie dropped the act and looked bored. Later, after Eli went upstairs, I told Lena that what her daughter had done was cruel. She replied, "Cruel would be teaching her to lie about what she sees." I stared at her. "What she sees is a kid struggling. And what he sees," Lena shot back, "is that if he spirals, every adult in the room rearranges themselves around it." That sentence stayed with me because it revealed how she really thought. To Lena, compassion was indulgence. Vulnerability was manipulation. If it became inconvenient, children were either sturdy enough to earn respect or soft enough to deserve contempt. Still, I stayed. Why? Because love is embarrassing. Not the beautiful kind. The humiliating kind. The kind that makes an intelligent man narrate over every warning sign. She's stressed. She had a hard marriage. She's defensive because she had to do so much alone. She'll soften once things feel secure. I had already proposed. We had picked a date. Deposits were paid. And Lena knew how to behave well enough, often enough, to make doubt feel disloyal. She could be radiant. She could touch my shoulder after a hard day and ask exactly the right question in exactly the right tone. She knew my coffee order, my migraine triggers, the playlists I used while designing late. She said she admired how gentle I was with Eli. Admired. That word should have warned me. Then came Thanksgiving. And after the table scene, after the drive home, after I made Eli hot chocolate and sat on the edge of his bed until his breathing settled, I went downstairs and checked my phone. 21 missed calls. All from Lena. 3 voicemails, 9 texts. The first messages were furious. "How dare you embarrass me like that? You completely misrepresented what happened. You left me there to answer for your tantrum." Then confusion started bleeding through the anger. "Call me now. This is ridiculous. Why are my cards declining?" Then panic. "Vincent, answer me. The gas station card didn't work. The Visa isn't working either. What did you do?" At 9:14 p.m., she texted, "I'm at the grocery store and all my cards are being rejected." At 9:27, the car payment app says, "Account access suspended." At 9:34, "Answer me right now." I sat at the kitchen table, lit only by the under cabinet lights, and felt something unfamiliar inside me. Not revenge, recognition. For 2 years, Lena had treated access as entitlement. Access to my money, my house, my flexibility, my patience, my willingness to smooth over harm. The moment access was interrupted, she experienced it as injustice. I called my bank, then my accountant. Then I logged into every account I controlled and did what I should have done months earlier. I removed her authorized user privileges, froze the travel card, changed the business card credentials, disabled the automatic transfer that caught her vehicle payment when she forgot, moved the remaining wedding funds into a protected account pending cancellations, updated passwords, removed every quiet financial convenience that had become invisible because I had kept it running too long. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic. Just a very overdue boundary. At 9:52, she called again. This time, I answered. She picked up in a fury. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I leaned back in my chair. "You'll need to be more specific. My cards are not working. Not your cards. The ones attached to my accounts." Her inhale came sharp. "Are you serious right now?" "Entirely." "You locked me out over an argument at dinner." "No. I locked you out because I'm done financing a household where my son gets humiliated." That is unbelievably manipulative. I smiled despite myself. "You mocked a 12-year-old's panic attack by proxy, defended it, and now I'm manipulative because I took back my credit lines. That is not what happened." "It's exactly what happened." I heard a car door slam on her end. She was probably standing in a brightly lit parking lot, furious that the world was no longer bending back into place. "You stranded me," she snapped. "No. I ended your access to money that isn't yours." Silence. Then her voice changed. Softer, colder, more strategic. Vincent, you're spiraling. I know tonight was ugly. I know Sophie crossed a line. But this is financial abuse. I actually laughed. Financial abuse? I repeated. Yes. Lena, I paid your car note for 7 months. That was because we were building a future. I covered your insurance. You offered. I paid for half your daughter's tutoring, your dental work when your coverage lapsed, the Asheville weekend, the Vermont lodge, and the phone in your purse. You're throwing everything in my face because you're angry. No, I said quietly. I'm naming things because you've spent 2 years pretending support means surrender. She was breathing hard now. Then she said the sentence that cured me. So what? You're punishing me because I chose my daughter over your son? I closed my eyes. There it was. Not remorse, not confusion, choice. As clear as a headline. When I opened my eyes, the kitchen looked different somehow. Less like a shared life, more like mine again. Yes, I said. That's exactly why she gasped like I had confessed to something cruel. I continued before she could pivot. You chose your daughter's cruelty over my son's dignity. So I'm choosing my son. You're blowing up our relationship over one dinner. No, I'm ending it over a pattern. She went silent for a moment. Then her voice turned clipped and icy. Fine. Then I want my things tomorrow. You can collect them Saturday between 10 and noon. I'll have them boxed in the garage. My things are in your bedroom. Not anymore. You do not get to decide this unilaterally. I just did. Then I hung up. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I regretted anything, because my body was finally catching up. Around 2 in the morning, Eli came downstairs in socks and stood in the hallway. You awake? He whispered. Yeah. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, hair a mess, face puffy with interrupted sleep. Are we okay? He asked. Children always know more than adults think they do. They hear tension through walls. They catch silence. They measure danger in tone. I got up, went around the table, and crouched beside him. We're okay, I said. Actually, we're going to be more okay than we've been in a while. He studied my face. Are they coming back? No. He nodded slowly, thinking. Then he asked, did I ruin it? I felt that question in my ribs. No, I said, and my voice cracked. You helped me see it. He leaned forward and hugged me, hard and sudden. I held on just as tight. Saturday morning, Lena arrived at 9:42 in the SUV I had co-signed for like a man determined to learn a lesson the expensive way. Sophie stayed in the passenger seat staring at her phone. I had spent Friday boxing everything carefully. Clothes, shoes, makeup, chargers, framed photos. Kitchen things she had brought. Wedding decorations. The ring sat in a velvet box on top of a sealed container labeled personal. I left nothing vague when Lena entered the garage and saw the boxes stacked by category. Her expression shifted from anger to disbelief. You packed my things? Yes. You had no right to go through my stuff. I packed it. I didn't publish it. She made a disgusted sound. You always do this. Do what? This controlled, calm, superior thing like you're the only adult in the room. That's rich. She ignored that. You could have called. We could have had a conversation. We did. At Thanksgiving. You chose wrong. That hit her harder than yelling would have. People like Lena can dodge emotion. They struggle more with plain truth delivered without performance. She glanced toward the open door into the house. Where's Eli? Inside. Good. I don't want him hearing this. I almost laughed at the sudden concern. Instead, I said, take your things. Her eyes narrowed. You think this makes you noble? No. I think it makes me late. I should have ended this sooner. Something in her face cracked then, not into regret, but insult, as if the greater offense was being judged by me. Do you know how hard I tried with him? She demanded. Do you know what it's like raising a daughter who sees weakness and refuses to fake around it? I stared at her. Compassion isn't fake. Cruelty isn't honesty. And if you've taught your daughter otherwise, that's on you. Her cheeks flushed. You always coddled him. No, I said. I protected him. From life? From you. For a second, she just stood there. Then Sophie got out of the car and stalked into the garage. Mom, can we just go? She looked irritated more than upset, which tracked. She was still young enough to think consequences were random weather. Lena straightened. Fine. She bent to grab a box, then stopped. The car payment bounced. Yes, you cannot just tank my credit because you're emotional. That loan gets refinanced into your name within 30 days, or I sell the vehicle. Her head snapped up. You wouldn't. I absolutely would. The paperwork was already with my attorney. Not revenge, administration. She stared at me like I was a different man. Maybe I was. Not harsher, just finished. Sophie reached toward the box with the ring before Lena did. Is this the stupid ring? Leave it, Lena said sharply. Then to me. You really want to do this in front of her? I said nothing. Because yes, actually, I did. Children should not be hidden from the fact that actions have consequences, especially when adults have spent years teaching them the opposite. They loaded the SUV in silence. On the third trip, Sophie paused near the garage door and said without looking at me, Eli is weird. My pulse surged, but before I could answer, another voice beat me to it. He's kind. It was Eli. He stood in the doorway from the mudroom, pale but steady. Sophie turned. Eli swallowed once, then kept going. And being scared sometimes isn't weird. Making fun of people because you think it makes you strong is weird. The look on Sophie's face was worth every ruined deposit. Lena spun around. Eli, that's enough. No, I said, it isn't. For the first time since I had known her, Sophie looked embarrassed. Not sorry, but embarrassed. Sometimes that's the first crack. She grabbed the last box and shoved past her mother. Lena's eyes flashed. You're turning him against us. I put a hand on Eli's shoulder. No, I'm teaching him he doesn't have to sit quietly while someone disrespects him. Then they left. The quiet, after their car pulled away, was so deep it almost rang. Eli stood beside me in the driveway, hands in his pockets. After a minute, he said, I didn't know if I was allowed to say that. You are, I replied. Always. You just don't have to say it alone. That afternoon, we took down every sign of the wedding. The venue kept a chunk of the deposit. The flowers were partly recoverable. The caterer kept more than I liked, but I didn't care. I sent the final cancellation email and felt lighter with every click. Over the next 2 weeks, the fallout kept coming. Mutual friends called. Some were genuinely concerned. Some wanted gossip. Some had already heard Lena's version, in which I had a meltdown, weaponized finances, and abandoned her family over team drama. I stopped correcting everyone. I corrected only the people who mattered. To them, I said this. Her daughter mocked my son's panic attack. She defended it. I ended the engagement. That sentence did more work than any long explanation. Lena tried once more 3 days later. She came to my office unannounced, heels clicking across the polished concrete, while my junior designer pretended very hard not to watch. Can we talk privately? She asked. I led her into the conference room. She stayed standing. You're making me out to be a monster. I sat anyway. Did you come here to apologize? Her mouth tightened. I came because you are destroying years of trust. Trust requires safety. So now I'm unsafe? For my son? Yes. She laughed once, stunned. You cannot be serious. I've never been more serious. She paced once, then stopped. Sophie is a teenager. Teenagers say awful things. Parents smooth it over. They don't detonate their families. No, I said. Good parents teach accountability. Everything is therapy language with you. Only because plain English wasn't working. That landed. For a brief second, I saw the woman I had loved beneath the polish and defensiveness. Hurt, humiliated, genuinely shocked that consequences had finally become real. Then she ruined it. You know, she said softly, there are women who would kill for a man like you. Stable, generous, soft-spoken. You should think about why you keep ending up with women who don't respect that. I almost smiled. Because that was the old trap. Make me the puzzle. Make my wound the topic. Shift from apology to analysis until I'm defending myself instead of holding the line. Not anymore. I already did think about it, I said. That's why this meeting is over. Her eyes hardened. You'll regret this. No, I said. I regret waiting. She left without another word. Winter settled in after that. The house changed first. It became quieter, obviously, but not empty. Empty feels haunted. Quiet feels safe. Eli started lingering downstairs again, drawing at the table while I worked, playing music softly in one ear, asking if we could cook together, laughing more, not instantly, not magically, but measurably, like a body relearning that it no longer needed to brace for impact. His therapist noticed too. "So do you," she told me once after a session handoff. "You seem lighter." "I am," I admitted. I started sleeping better, went back to the gym, took on only the client work I actually wanted, instead of accepting everything because I was quietly subsidizing 2 additional people's chaos. Repainted the guest room, turned the would-have-been shared office into a proper studio space where Eli could sketch while I worked. The financial difference was immediate and almost obscene. I hadn't realized how much low-grade panic I had been carrying until it was gone. No surprise tuition gap, no emergency beauty appointment before some sales conference, no mystery subscription charges, no "I'll cover it next month" on dinners, tires, school fees, holiday bookings, streaming services, or 100 tiny leaks that had somehow become my job. My accountant looked over the next quarter and said, "Congratulations. Your personal burn rate stopped bleeding." I laughed so hard I had to wipe my eyes. Lena texted a few times over the next couple of months. Tax forms, loan paperwork, one attempt to retrieve a scarf that definitely did not matter enough to justify contact. I kept every response brief and documented. Then in February, she sent, "I hope you're happy." I looked across the room at Eli, asleep on the couch with one sock half off, a sketchbook on his chest, movie credits washing blue light over his face. I typed back, "I am." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for answering honestly. By spring, the story had traveled far enough through mutual circles that I started hearing distant versions of it. Some painted me as cruel. Some painted me as heroic. I was neither. I was a father who hit his limit. That matters, because people love dramatic endings. But the truth is, most lives change because someone finally enforces a line they should have drawn months or years earlier. The real climax wasn't the Thanksgiving exit. It wasn't the frozen cards. It wasn't even the ring boxed in the garage. The real climax was internal. It was the moment I stopped negotiating against my own instincts. In early April, Eli came home from school and tossed his backpack on the bench. "Dad? Yeah? There's this spring showcase thing at school. For art." I looked up from my laptop. "Okay." He shrugged too casually. "My teacher picked one of my pieces." I stood so fast, my chair rolled backward. "That's amazing." He smiled, small but real. "You want to come?" That question hurt more than Thanksgiving ever did. Because of course I wanted to come. Of course. But the fact that he asked carefully, like my showing up might still be conditional, reminded me how much repair we were still doing. I walked over and cupped the back of his neck. I wouldn't miss it. At the showcase, his piece hung under white track lighting on a gray felt panel. It was a portrait made of layered pencil, cut paper, and ink wash. A boy underwater, eyes open, reaching upward through dark blue shapes toward a fractured square of light. The label read, "Surface Tension" by Eli M. I stood there so long, another parent had to edge around me. When Eli came beside me, I asked, "What made you do this one?" He looked at the piece for a long moment. Then he said, "It's about what it feels like when everyone can see you struggling, but they don't actually help. They just watch to see if you make it out." I swallowed hard. "And the light?" He shrugged. "That's the way out." I put my arm around him. He let me. That night, after pizza and terrible celebratory milkshakes, after he had gone upstairs, I stood alone in the kitchen where I had once frozen cards and canceled a wedding. I thought about Lena, not with longing, not even with anger, just clarity. She had loved me the way some people love shelter, warmth, usefulness, reliability, structure. She loved what my steadiness made possible for her, but she never truly honored the center of me, and she certainly never honored the center of my life, my son. And that was the whole truth. I don't hate her. Hate implies intimacy. I'm past that. Sometimes I wonder whether she ever replayed that dinner and understood the exact second she lost me. Maybe when Sophie gets older and turns that same sharpened honesty on her, she'll finally understand that cruelty is not strength in better clothing. Maybe not. That is no longer mine to solve. What is mine is simpler and harder. To build a home where Eli never has to ask if he ruined things by being hurt. To teach him that sensitivity is not weakness. To show him, by example, that love without respect is just dependency dressed up well. To remember that boundaries are not punishments. They are structure. That's probably the designer in me talking. But it's true. People think a life falls apart all at once, with one spectacular scene. A slammed door. A dramatic line. A ring returned. A bank card declined under fluorescent lights. But collapse usually starts earlier, in tiny structural failures ignored for too long. And recovery starts the same way. One decision, one line. One calm, final no. On Thanksgiving, my fiancé said, "Your son is too sensitive." My daughter was just being honest. She expected me to soothe, to excuse, to stay seated and make my child swallow humiliation for the sake of adult convenience. Instead, I said, "You're right. He's sensitive to disrespect." Then I took my son and left. 3 hours later, she called 21 times asking why her cards weren't working. The honest answer? Because mine finally was.